Have you ever felt that something inside you are trying to tell you something, but you just can't understand? As if there was a voice whispering inside your mind, trying to warn you of something important. What if I tell you that this is not just random thinking? Carl Jung has dedicated his life to the study of the unconscious and revealed that there are clear signs that your mind is trying to communicate with you. But are you listening? You may have gone through this. Strange and recurring dreams, that inexplicable feeling of déjà vu, or even encounters with people who seem to bring hidden messages to your life. None of this is coincidence. If you feel that certain events happen in a synchronized way, or that your emotions seem to guide you mysteriously, know that your unconscious may be screaming for attention. The truth is that most people ignore these signs. They continue to live on autopilot, attached to the routines of everyday life without realizing that there is a call happening inside them. But what if you could decipher these signs? What if you could understand what your own unconscious is trying to tell you? Carl Jung believed that within each of us there is a deep knowledge, a hidden path that is always revealing itself through dreams, symbols, and synchronics. If you have felt that your intuition has been stronger lately, or that certain coincidences seem to have greater meaning, this is no coincidence. Your unconscious may be trying to guide you to something transformative, but how do you know if this is really happening? How to differentiate a simple thought from a true call from your inner self? The problem is that most people were not taught to hear their own mind. We live in a noisy, distracted world where silence has become rare, but it is in silence that the answers appear. That's when you start paying attention to your own thoughts, repetitive patterns, and deep emotions that all start to make sense. And believe me, ignoring these signs can have consequences. Your unconscious can begin to send stronger messages, manifesting through anxiety, insomnia, or even extreme tiredness. When you don't hear what your mind wants to tell you, she finds other ways to get your attention. But are you ready to understand what is happening inside you? If you have experienced such experiments, then keep watching. Because now let's dive even deeper into the signs that indicate that your unconscious is trying to communicate with you. But before we plunged into these hidden signs that Carl Jung has studied so much, I want to know about you. Have you ever felt that something inside you was trying to warn you of something important? Have you ever been through an experience in which it seemed that the universe was trying to communicate with you through dreams, synchronization, or inexplicable sensations? Tell me here in the comments. I want to know your story, because the more we share these experiences, the more we realize that we are not alone in this process. And if this content is making sense to you, it already leaves the like, because it not only helps me to understand that this kind of theme interests you, but also makes this message come to more people who may be going through something similar. Subscribe to the channel and activate the bell not to lose the next videos, because in the next parts we will further delve into the signs they show when your unconscious is trying to tell you something. Now let's go on, because what you will find out can completely change the way you see your own mind. You have already had the feeling that you are stuck in an endless cycle, as if something inside you were trying to show you a way out, but you just can't see it? As if there was a voice whispering in his subconscious, trying to point away, but the noise of daily life would completely turn this call. If you've been through moments when everything seemed stagnant, where the answers seemed distant, and you saw yourself repeating the same mistakes, know that this is no coincidence. The truth is that your unconscious is talking to you all the time. He tries to warn you, tries to direct you, but most people were simply not taught to listen. We live in a world that conditions us to focus on the outside, following rules, to seek solutions outside ourselves. But what if the key to leaving this cycle was already inside you? Carl Jung spent his life studying the mysteries of the human mind and revealed that There is a hidden part within us that keeps all the answers. The problem is that when we ignore the signs this part sends us, our life begins to collapse. Maybe you are feeling that something is wrong, but you can't explain exactly what. As if there was an emptiness, a restlessness that does not pass. You may try to ignore, occupy your mind with distractions, but at some point these feelings come back harder. This is because your unconscious does not give up. He insists, he repeats patterns, he creates situations for you to realize that something within you needs to change. And the more you ignore, the more intense these signs become. The signs can arise in many ways. Some people begin to have recurring dreams with symbolic messages that seem not to make sense at first sight. Others feel inexplicable discomfort in certain places or with certain people, as if something inside were shouting to pay attention. Has it happened that you felt a strong intuition about a decision and, out of fear or doubt, ignoring that feeling, just then realizing that your feeling was right? This is no coincidence. Your unconscious knows things that your conscious mind has not yet realized. Carl Jung called this individuation process a path of self-knowledge where the unconscious tries to communicate with you so that your true essence comes to light. But this is not always comfortable. Most of the time, awakening begins through pain, discomfort, feeling that your life is not aligned with who you really are. When you feel lost, without purpose, clearly about which direction to take, this is one of the lighter signs that your mind is trying to alert you. And this is where many people make the biggest mistake. They resist. They try to silence the call of the unconscious through distractions, avoiding silence, avoiding looking truly. But ignoring this process does not make it disappear. On the contrary, the more you try to escape, the stronger it becomes. And then crises of anxiety, insomnia, inexplicable tiredness, situations that repeat in your life as if they were an impossible cycle to break. How many times have you been thinking, why does it always happen to me? Or, looks like I'm stuck in a pattern that I can't get out. This is not unlucky, it is not a destination, let alone a curse. This is your unconscious trying to show you something you need to see, something you need to understand so that you can finally move on. But for that, it takes courage. Courage to look inside, to question your own thoughts, your beliefs, your deepest emotions. And maybe you are wondering, but how do I do that? How do I start to understand these signs? How do I hear what my unconscious is trying to tell me? This is exactly what we will explore next. Prepare yourself, because what you will find out can completely change the way you see your own mind and your own life. Now tell me here in the comments, you already felt you were stuck in a repetitive cycle, as if something inside you were trying to show you a way, but you couldn't understand. Write down here, I want to understand the signs, if you've been through this. Let's explore this mystery together and decipher the messages your mind is sending. If you have gotten here, it is because somehow something inside you have realized that there is something else. You feel that there is a call happening internally, a restlessness that you cannot explain completely, but always there, present, as a voice, whispering within your mind. Many people live their entire lives ignoring this feeling, believing that they are just random thoughts. But what if I told you that this restlessness is actually a clear sign that your unconscious is trying to communicate with you? And if you were getting messages every day and just didn't know how to interpret them? Carl Jung, one of the greatest scholars of the human mind, dedicated his life to understanding the mysteries of the unconscious and revealed that he speaks to us all the time. The problem is that almost no one was taught to listen. The unconscious manifests itself in many ways: symbolic dreams, synchronization, repetitive patterns in your life, intense feelings that arise for no apparent reason, and even that feeling of déjà vu that makes us question if we already lived that moment before. But what happens when we ignore these signs? If the unconscious is always trying to guide us, Why do so many people feel lost, locked, and without direction? The reason is simple. We have been taught to prioritize logic, extreme rationality, to ignore our intuition and the subtle signs that our mind sends. The result of this? A world full of people who feel disconnected from themselves, not understanding why their lives seem to be always spinning in circles, repeating the same mistakes, attracting the same situations, and feeling constant frustration without a clear explanation. If this is resonating with you, know that it is not a coincidence. You are beginning to realize something that few people understand. Your unconscious not only influences your life, it is constantly shaping your reality, your decisions, and even the people who come in or get out of your way. But if you do not learn to hear it, you can end up living a life that is not truly yours, just following standards that have been implemented without you realizing it. And the question that remains is, are you really living your purpose, or is just being taken by the current of your unconscious conditioning? Carl Jung believed that the process of individuation, that is, the way to become who we really are, inevitably goes through the encounter with our own unconscious. This means that all the answers you seek out there, about your life, your destiny, your purpose, actually already within you, waiting to be discovered. But the question is, are you ready to face what your unconscious has to reveal? Because this journey is not always easy. In fact, most of the time it is uncomfortable, intense, and may even be scary. After all, we are talking about accessing parts of ourselves who have been repressed, ignored, and often forgotten for so long that it seems safer to leave them where they are. But is living in ignorance really safer? Or is the real danger not to know yourself? This is exactly why Jung warned us about the importance of interpreting the signs that the unconscious gives us. He knew that our deep mind operates through symbols, and that if we learned to decipher these messages, we could access a level of understanding that would completely change the way we see our lives. But for that, we need to delve into the mechanisms that the unconscious uses to communicate. Dreams are one of the most powerful channels of this communication. For Jung, they are not just random images created by the mind while we sleep, but coded messages from our unconscious. Each symbol, every scene, and every emotion within a dream carries a meaning that, when interpreted correctly, can reveal deep truths about ourselves and what is happening in our wake-up life. Another phenomenon that Jung has studied and is directly linked to the way the unconscious manifests itself is the synchronicities. Have you noticed that sometimes certain events seem to align so perfectly that it is impossible to believe that they are just coincidences? How when you think of someone and that person sends you a message, or when you get exactly the answer you needed to hear at the right time? Jung has defined synchronicity as the external manifestation of an internal process, a reflection of what is happening in his unconscious. This means that what you see in the world around you can be a direct reflection of what is going on within you. If you feel that your life has repetitive patterns, that you always attract the same types of people or situations, know that this can be a clear indication that there is something within your unconscious that needs to be understood. As long as these patterns are not brought to consciousness, they will continue to repeat themselves as an infinite cycle. Jung said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, he will direct your life, and you will call you destination." And this phrase carries a huge weight. How many things in your life today seem to be out of your control? How many times have you felt that you were stuck in circumstances that simply repeat themselves, unable to get out of this cycle? This is no chance, and it is definitely not bad luck. It is the direct reflection of what is hidden within your mind. But what happens when you finally start to see these standards? When you realize that everything that happens in your life has an origin within you, you gain a power that few people have, the power of consciousness. And with this power comes the ability to change its own reality. But here is the great challenge. The conscious mind itself has no direct access to the unconscious. You can't just decide, now I want to know everything in my unconscious and wait for the answers to appear magically. The unconscious reveals itself in a subtle way through symbols, metaphors, and experiences that often seem disconnected, but when analyzed carefully, they make perfect sense. And that's exactly why it is so important to develop the ability to interpret these signs. When you learn to observe your dreams, to pay attention to synchronicities, to perceive the patterns that repeat in your life, you begin to unlock a level of understanding that can completely transform your trajectory. You begin to realize that nothing is really by chance, and that there is deep intelligence operating behind the scenes of your mind. But here's a question that can change everything to you. Are you ready to see the truth about yourself? Because once you awaken to this knowledge, there is no way to go back. You can no longer pretend you don't know. You can no longer be fooled and keep living on autopilot. Because when you start to see the signs, everything changes. You finally understand that you have the power to change your own reality. And this is the first step to true transformation. Now, I want to know about you. Have you ever had a dream that seemed more than just a dream? Have you ever noticed strange patterns repeating yourself in your life and wondered if this had any deeper meaning? Leave the phrase here in the comments. I'm ready to understand my unconscious. If you've had the feeling that something inside you're trying to communicate, but you couldn't understand exactly what it was, then this is the time to pay attention. Because believe me, your unconscious has already tried to send you signs over and over, and the problem is that most of the time, we simply ignore or do not know how to interpret. What Carl Jung has discovered about the human mind is so powerful that if you really understand it, it can change the way you see your life. Because the truth is that your mind knows more about you than you think yourself. While your rational consciousness deals with everyday demands, your unconscious is working at a much deeper level, organizing information, recording emotions, and most importantly, trying to guide you. The problem is that the language of the unconscious is not straightforward, it is symbolic, which is why many of the signs he sends go unnoticed. But when you begin to recognize the patterns of this communication, it all starts to make sense. Dreams are one of the most powerful forms of manifestation of the unconscious. And here I ask you, have you ever had a dream so vivid that it seemed real? Or maybe a dream that was repeated several times, as if trying to tell you something? This does not happen by chance. Jung believed that dreams are the bridge between unconscious and consciousness, a form of direct communication that uses symbols and metaphors to convey important messages. The problem is that most people do not pay attention to their own dreams, or simply discard them as meaningless nonsense. But what if that recurring dream you have been in fact a warning of your unconscious for years? If each image, every sensation within your dream has a deeper meaning? Think about it. Because the unconscious never wastes time by sending unimportant messages, and dreams are not the only way in which the unconscious tries to communicate with you. Have you ever been living your life normally and suddenly having the feeling that you have gone through it before? The famous déjà vu. Many people ignore this phenomenon, but for Jung, déjà vu may be a sign that your unconscious recognizes a pattern or is trying to remind you of something. It can be a connection with something from the past. It may be a warning that you are repeating a cycle, or even a message to pay attention to something specific. And here I ask you, have you ever tried a déjà vu so intense that you felt that you knew exactly what would happen next? This can be a clear indication that your unconscious is showing you something that your conscious mind has not yet realized. Now let's talk about those thoughts that seem apparently out of nowhere. You are focused on a task or even distracted, and suddenly random thinking appears in your mind. Sometimes it is a name, sometimes it is an image, a feeling, or even a sudden warning. Have you ever stopped to think that these thoughts may not be that random? Often they are the unconscious bringing to light something that needs to be seen, something that has been kept, waiting for the right time to emerge. When you feel a strong boost to connect to someone, to change your way, or to avoid a situation without a logical explanation, it can be your deep mind trying to protect you or direct you. What about intense and inexplicable emotions? Have you ever felt sadness or anguish without knowing why? Or, out of nowhere, did you feel an euphoria, a feeling that something amazing was about to happen, even without any apparent reason? Often these feelings are direct manifestations of the unconscious, which perceives energy changes even before their rational mind processes them. This means that your emotions can be a true thermometer of what is happening within you. But unfortunately, most people ignore or repress what they feel without realizing that these emotions may be loaded with valuable messages. And if I told you that the universe also responds to your I sense through synchronicities? Have you ever been thinking of a person and a few minutes later to receive a message from them? Or maybe you had a problem and suddenly started to find by chance content, phrases, or people who spoke exactly about it. This is no coincidence. Jung called this synchronicity, a phenomenon where external events align perfectly with what is happening within you. The universe is highly symbolic and works in tune with your deep mind, sending you signals through seemingly random events. The question is, are you aware of these signs or keep ignoring the messages your own life is giving you? When you start paying attention to how your unconscious speaks to you, your perception of the world changes completely. You stop believing that everything is random and begins to see the hidden patterns behind events. You realize that every thought, every emotion, and each event carries a deeper meaning. And it gives you power, because when you understand how your mind communicates, you start making more aligned decisions. You start following signs instead of fighting them. And this is the big difference between people who live intuitively and those who are trapped on autopilot. But here is something even deeper. Your unconscious not only sends you signs, but also directly influences the reality you experience. This means that what is repressed within you may be shaping the events of your life without you realizing it. Has it ever happened to you always attract the same types of relationships, or to always be going through the same challenges as if stuck in an endless cycle? This is because your unconscious is repeating patterns that you have not yet brought to the light of consciousness. Until you become aware of what is happening within you, these standards will continue to manifest in your external world. And this is where a lot of people fail, because it is not enough just to perceive the signs of the unconscious. You need to know how to interpret them, and more than that, to act according to what is being revealed. The problem is that often these messages go against what we want to hear. The unconscious may be showing you that it is time to abandon a situation, but your rational mind resists. It may be warning you that a cycle has ended, but you insist on clinging to what no longer makes sense. This conflict between what your deep mind knows and what your conscious mind wants can generate anxiety, blockages, and even physical symptoms. This is why people who learn to interpret the signs of the unconscious often have more aligned lives. They do not make decisions based only on superficial logic, but also on deeper intelligence that is always trying to guide them to the right way. The problem is that many people are disconnected from this intelligence. They are so dipped in the outside noise that they cannot hear the inner voice that is trying to direct them. And that is why so many people feel lost, without purpose, without clarity. The secret to getting out of this state is not out there, it's inside you. The moment you learn to decipher your own mind, you discover a power that has always been there, but you may have never learned to access. Now, I want to know about you. Does any of these signs have happened to you? Have you ever had recurring dreams, intense déjà vus, felt inexplicable emotions, or went through synchronicities that seem to want to tell you something? Comment down here the phrase, "My unconscious is trying to guide me." I want to see how many people are starting to wake up to this truth. If so far you have realized that your unconscious communicates in ways that often go unnoticed, so now is the time to go even deeper. Because the truth is that nothing you feel, dreams, or experiences in your life happens by chance. How many times have you had a strong feeling about something and ignored it? How many times have your intuition to warn you of something and you, for lack of clarity or simply out of fear, chose to go the opposite way? And then looking back, did you realize that you should have heard that feeling, that sign, that inner voice that seemed to be calling you? This is not a coincidence. Your unconscious is all the time trying to protect you, alert you, guide you to something bigger. But the big question is, are you paying attention? Many people live disconnected from themselves, attached to a way of life where they simply follow the flow without question. They think their emotions are just momentary answers to external events. They believe that their dreams are just meaningless random images. They think that synchronicities are just worthless coincidences. But what if all that were, in true, a great attempt by your unconscious to communicate with you? What if your mind was trying to show you something you insist on not seeing? If you feel that there are patterns that are repeated in your life, if certain people, places, and experiences seem to manifest themselves cyclically, then this is not mere chance. You may be guided to an awakening that you have not yet understood. Jung believed that when we ignore the signs of the unconscious, he finds other ways of manifesting himself. This is why so many people carry an anguish within themselves who do not know how to explain. Anxieties that seem to arise out of nowhere, empty sensations that accompany them even when everything apparently is fine. This is because there is something that needs to be seen, something that is trying to emerge to the surface of your consciousness, but for some reason is still being repressed. And do you know what is the worst part? The longer you ignore this inner voice, the stronger it becomes. The unconscious does not simply disappear because you chose not to hear it. On the contrary, it manifests itself in increasingly intense ways, either through disturbing dreams or through emotions that seem uncontrollable, or even repetitive situations that put you in the same way and times without end. Have you ever realized that you are always attracting the same types of people to your life, or that, regardless of how much, always seems to fall into the same emotional traps, the same behavioral patterns? This is not because you have unlucky. This is because your unconscious is trying to show you something about yourself that has not yet been understood. And until this lesson is learned, the cycle will continue to repeat itself. How many times have you ever wondered, why does it always happen to me? Or, why do I always end in the same place regardless of what I do? If these questions have gone through your mind, then know that the universe is not against you. Your unconscious is not punishing you. He is trying to wake you up. But to understand these messages, you need to learn to look inside with courage. Because often what the unconscious wants to show you can be uncomfortable. It can reveal truths that you spent a lifetime avoiding. It can make you realize that many of your pains have not come from the outside world, but from the stories you told yourself about who you are and how life works. And this process can be painful because it requires that you confront parts of yourself that you may have spent years trying to ignore. But the truth is that however difficult, this journey of self-knowledge is the only real form of transformation. Your dreams are not just random images. They carry important messages about your life, about your fears, about what you have not yet processed. Emotionally, each symbol within a dream has a meaning. Jung knew this and dedicated years of study to understand how these dream images reflect our psyche. And it's not just dreams that speak to us. Emotions are also messages from the unconscious. When you feel inexplicable discomfort upon entering an environment or approaching certain people, your unconscious may be capturing information that your rational mind has not yet realized. When you feel an inexplicable attraction on a specific path, it may be because there is something there that is aligned with your true purpose. But how many times have you ignored these emotions, thinking they were just passing sensations? The reality is that all these messages are part of a much larger puzzle. Your unconscious is constantly trying to put you on the right track, trying to help you access your true potential, trying to make you see what really matters. But if you keep distracting yourself with everyday superficialities, if you are still stuck with standards that move you away from your truth, then no matter how many signs are sent, you just won't see them. And the question I want to do you now is, what needs to happen most in your life so that you finally pay attention? Because maybe the signs are already there. Perhaps the answers you seek so much have appeared countless times, but you just chose to ignore them. Perhaps that relationship that ended unexpectedly was a deliverance you have not yet understood. Perhaps that opportunity that didn't work out was a necessary deviation to lead you to something much bigger. Perhaps that person who entered his life unexpectedly was placed there by the universe to teach you something crucial. But if you are not aware, all this can go unnoticed, and you will continue to repeat the same standards, believing that you are trapped in a destination that could actually be mud the moment you begin to see more clearly. And that's why you need to start paying attention now, because the longer you ignore the signs, the stronger the impact of the next message your unconscious will send you. If you do not learn through intuition, you will learn through pain. If you do not hear the whispers from your mind, it will start to scream. And when this happens, it's usually too late. Have you found yourself in situations where you felt that everything collapsed at the same time, as if your life had been turned upside down overnight? These moments of crisis are usually the accumulated result of signs ignored for time. The unconscious gave you alerts, sent you subtle signs, showed you through emotions, dreams, and synchronicities that something needed to change. But as you did not hear, the change came abruptly. Now you have two choices. You can continue to live on autopilot, ignoring your intuition, pretending that your deep mind is not trying to communicate with you. Or you can begin to pay attention to the signs and take control of your own journey. And I ask you, are you ready to see the truth that your unconscious is trying to show you? If you felt that this message made sense to you, comment below the phrase, "I choose to hear my unconscious." I want to see how many people are really committed to understanding the signs the mind itself sends. If you really want to understand how your unconscious influences your life, then you need to imagine your mind as a huge iceberg floating in the ocean. The visible part above water is your conscious mind, what you perceive and understand in everyday life. But this part is tiny compared to the submerged immensity that is just below the surface. This invisible part is your unconscious, and it really controls your emotions, your behaviors, and even your most important choices. Now imagine a boat sailing the ocean without realizing that there is a huge iceberg ahead. If this boat does not know about the existence of the submerged part, it can collide and sink without even understanding what happened. This is exactly what happens when you ignore the signs of your unconscious. You may think you are making rational decisions, you may believe you have control of your life, but in fact, there is much deeper strength guiding you. And if you do not learn to recognize and understand these forces, you can end up living a lifetime being directed by standards you don't even know exist. Now, let's make it even clearer with an example. Imagine that your mind is like a theater. On the main stage is your conscience. This is what you see and perceive every day. It is your actions, your conscious choices, your visible personality to the world. But behind the scenes, in the dark corridors that no one sees, is the real control of the piece, the unconscious. He is the hidden director, the invisible screenwriter who dictates the lines, chooses the scenarios, and defines the characters that come in and out of his story. And the scariest? You can spend a lifetime without realizing that you are not the real protagonist of your own play. You may think you are making decisions on your own, when in fact you are just following a script that was written long before you realize. This is because its unconscious is formed from childhood through experiences, trauma, beliefs, and repressed emotions that shape its way of seeing the world. If you do not become aware of this process, you continue to play a role you did not choose, repeating patterns that were programmed without you knowing. Now think to me, how many times have you tried to change something in your life and have been locked, as if something inside you is pulling you back, preventing you from moving forward? This is because, while your conscious mind wants a change, your unconscious may be operating with totally opposite beliefs. Imagine that you are trying to cross a river. On the margin where you are now is the life you know. On the opposite bank is the life you want. You may be determined to cross, you may have all the motivation of the world, but if there is an invisible current pulling you back, the effort will be useless. This current is your unconscious, working from old standards you have not yet identified. And that doesn't just happen to you. Every day, billions of people live stuck in invisible standards, never question why their lives follow certain directions. They keep choosing the same types of relationships, the same jobs, the same ways, and when they realize they are stagnant, they wonder, why does it always happen to me? But the answer is just below the surface. It is in that submerged part of the iceberg that has never been enlightened. It is behind the scenes of the theater where the true decisions are being made. It is in this invisible current which has the power to keep you exactly where you are without you realizing that it is hostage to something that should be under your control. And the truth is that it manifests itself in very subtle ways in everyday life. Has it happened to meet someone and within a few seconds feel an inexplicable connection? Or on the contrary, to feel an immediate aversion for no apparent reason? This is because the unconscious captures information that your conscious mind has not yet soothed. He recognizes subtle patterns of behavior, voice tones, facial expressions, even energies that escape rational perception. You have already entered an environment and felt immediate discomfort, as if something there was wrong, even unable to explain why. This is your unconscious talking to you. He may have identified signs that his conscious mind has ignored. Maybe a smell, a memory, a subtle detail that aroused something inside you. But if you are not used to listening to this inner voice, it may end up disregarding these alerts, following a path that was already signaled as dangerous. And it's not just the emotions that reflect this communication. Your body also speaks. How many times have you felt a tightness in your chest, a feeling of weight on your shoulders, a physical restlessness without a logical explanation? The unconscious does not use words to communicate. He uses sensations. He expresses himself through his body, his emotional state, the subtle signs that arise when something needs to be seen. If you feel extreme tiredness without a clear reason, if your breathing changes when you are facing certain people or situations, if there is a constant tension in your body, it can be a direct reflection of something your deep mind is trying to tell you. Now imagine that your life is a car at high speed. You are in the driver's seat, holding the steering wheel, believing that you have full control of the steering. But what you do not realize is that there is an invisible co-pilot by your side, which from time to time turns the steering wheel subtly to the other way. This co-pilot is your unconscious, and it may be taking you by routes you didn't even realize. You may have sworn that you would never repeat certain standards, but here you are, living exactly what you wanted to avoid. He may have promised that this time it would be different. but he realizes that somehow he returned to the same point as before. This is because, while your conscience is looking forward, your unconscious is still holding the map that was designed long before you decide to change. And if this map is not rewritten, you will continue to drive on the same road, regardless of how many times try to change route. The question is, how to change that? How to rewrite this internal map? How to illuminate the backstage of theater? How to dive into the submerged part of the iceberg to finally take control of their own life? The first step is to start paying attention. Observe the signs your deep mind gives you. Be aware of the patterns that are repeated in your life, questioning their own beliefs, their own impulses, their automatic reactions that often seem to arise for no reason. The unconscious is like a gigantic puzzle, and every experience, every emotion, every synchronicity that comes in its path is a piece of this great image. But if you do not look at these pieces carefully, you will remain lost, trying to fit parts that make no sense without realizing that the key to understanding everything has always been there. And I want to know about you. Have you ever been feeling that you were being guided by something invisible, as if repeating patterns you didn't even know existed? Have you ever felt that your life was following a hidden script written by strength you couldn't see? I want you to comment below the phrase, "I choose to rewrite my script," to show that you are ready to see beyond the obvious and finally take control of your journey. If so far you have understood that your unconscious is communicating with you all the time, now the most important time has come, learning to interpret these signs and apply them to your life. Because knowing that your deep mind sends you messages is just the first step. The real awakening happens when you begin to decipher these messages and use them to transform your reality. And this is where many people fail. They perceive patterns, feel inexplicable emotions, have symbolic dreams, and experience synchronicities, but they don't know what to do with it. They see the puzzle pieces, but they don't know how to assemble it. And that's why we now deeply dive into the practical application of this knowledge. I will show you step by step how you can start interpreting the signs of your unconscious and use them as a true map for SUA life. The first and most powerful tool for accessing and understanding your unconscious is the dream diary. If you really want to understand what your deep mind is trying to tell you, then you need to create the habit of recording your dreams. Because, as we have spoken before, dreams are not just random stories that your mind creates while you sleep. They are direct messages from the unconscious, expressed through symbols, archetypes, and metaphors. But if you do not record your dreams, it ends up forgetting them quickly, and thus loses valuable information that could reveal a lot about yourself. The first thing you should do when you wake up is to write everything you remember your dream, without judging or trying to interpret it on time. Write down the details, feelings, colors, people, places. Everything matters. Often, the conscious mind tries to ignore certain aspects of the dream because they seem irrelevant, but it is precisely in these small details that are the most important clues. And here is a secret that few people know. Dreams do not need to be interpreted on the same day. Sometimes the meaning of a dream becomes clear only after a few days, when new pieces of the puzzle arise in your wake-up life. This is why maintaining a diary is essential. Over time, you begin to perceive patterns, recurring symbols, messages that repeat themselves, and then you can connect the points. In addition to dreams, another fundamental way to connect with your unconscious is to pay attention to synchronicities. And here I want you to reflect. How many times something seemingly random has happened in your life, but made you feel that there was a meaning behind it? How many times have you thought about a person, and minutes later, did she send you a message? How many times did you find exactly the answer you needed in a book, a conversation, or even a billboard on the street? This is no chance. This is your unconscious and the universe conspiring to guide you. But to understand these messages, you need to be aware. Most people go through the days automatically, without realizing that their lives are trying to talk to them. But if you begin to look at synchronics and ask yourself, what may be trying to show me? You will open a new level of perception. And here is a powerful exercise. Every time something seems a significant coincidence, write down, write. What happened, how you felt, what was the context of your life at that moment? Over time, you will see that these coincidences are not random. They follow a pattern, a conductive wire that takes you where you need to be. Another essential tool for interpreting the signs of your unconscious is to learn to observe your emotions. This is because your feelings are like internal compasses, showing you what is aligned with you and what is not. But the problem is that most people don't listen to their emotions. They repress, ignore, or try to logically justify what they feel. And here is a big mistake, because if an emotion comes inside you without a clear explanation, it means something unconscious behind. Has it happened that you feel a deep sadness out of nowhere? Or a fear that seemed to have no reason? Have you ever felt an inexplicable anger at something apparently small? These feelings do not arise for nothing. They are clear signs that there is something in their unconscious that needs to be looked at. And the best way to deal with this is to stop and ask yourself, where does this emotion come from? What is this trying to show me? Often, an intense feeling is linked to an event of the past that you have not yet processed. It can be a suppressed memory, a forgotten trauma, or even a behavioral pattern that you have been repeating without realizing it. But if you don't allow yourself to feel and question these emotions, they continue to emerge as increasingly strong alerts. It's as if your unconscious is poking you, trying to get your attention, but you insist on ignoring. And the more you ignore, the more these emotions intensify. Now, perhaps the most powerful tool of all to access the unconscious is meditation and silence. We live in such a noisy world, so full of distractions, that most people never to simply hear their minds. But the unconscious speaks more clearly when you are in a state of deep relaxation. That's why so many people get insights while showering, before bed, or soon upon waking. Because at these times, the rational mind is less active, allowing the unconscious to bring out important messages. But what if you could access this state intentionally? This is exactly what meditation does. When you learn to silence external and internal noises, you begin to clearly realize the thoughts, feelings, and images that come within you. And these eye maps often carry deep meanings. Meditating does not necessarily mean emptying the mind, as many believe. On the contrary, it may mean creating a space to observe thoughts without being attached to them. Just sitting in silence, breathing deeply, and allowing the mind to express yourself can reveal things that have been hidden for years. If you really want to connect with your unconscious, try booking a few minutes every day for this intentional silence. Just close your eyes, breathe, and observe what comes up. And to make this practice even more effective, a powerful exercise you can do is automatic writing. Take a paper and a pen, relax, take a deep breath, and simply write what comes to mind, without filters, without judgments. Do not try to organize the ideas. Just let the words flow. Often you will find that your unconscious will begin to dump information, bringing out thoughts and connections you didn't even know existed. This technique is one of the most direct forms of communication with your deep mind and can reveal patterns, emotions, and answers that were hidden. Now, I want you to stop a moment and think, how many times have you ignored the signs of your unconscious? How many times has your intuition tried to guide you, but have you chosen to go the other way? Have you ever had dreams that looked significant but put aside because they were just nonsense? Have you ever felt inexplicable emotions but didn't give due attention? Have you experienced synchronics but hasn't reflected what they could mean? If your answer is yes, then it's time to change that. It's time to start seeing these signs as real and valuable messages, because the truth is that the universe and its unconscious keep talking to you. The only question is, are you willing to listen? And now, I want you to answer me in the comments. Which of these tools will you start using first? Are you going to create a dream diary, pay more attention to synchronicities, observe your emotions, or reserve time for silence and meditation? Write down here, I choose to listen to my unconscious, to show that you are committed to applying this knowledge to your life. If so far you have understood the importance of paying attention to the signs of your unconscious and began to apply some techniques to connect with this hidden part of your mind, now is the moment when it all starts to change. Because it is not just about understanding what is happening within you. True power arises when you learn to use this knowledge to transform your life. When you begin to hear your unconscious and trust your own intuition, everything aligns. Your decisions become more accurate. You see previously invisible patterns and, more importantly, begins to realize that what seemed like a coincidence has always been guided by something much greater within you. Your own inner self becomes your most reliable guide, and it completely changes the way you interact with the world around you. Many people spend their lives looking for answers outside of themselves. They believe that the solution to their problems is in someone else, in a specific book, a miraculous technique, or even external signs that may indicate which way to go. But the great truth is that all answers have always been inside them. But most have never been taught to look inside and trust their own power, and that's exactly where the unconscious comes in. Not only does it store information about your life, your emotions, and your trauma, but it is also a deep wisdom reservoir that can guide you to much more aligned choices you really are with. Imagine for a moment what your life would be like if you could access this knowledge whenever you needed it. If before you make an important decision, you could interpret the signs of your unconscious and clearly feel the best way. If you could realize the subtle patterns that are shaping your experiences and understand why certain situations continue to repeat themselves. If you were able to identify when your mind is sabotaging you and reprogramming these patterns in a way that favors you. This is the true transformation. You are no longer just a viewer of your own life and becomes the conscious creator of your reality. And when that happens, everything changes. His relationship with fear, for example, becomes completely. Fear is one of the most powerful mechanisms of the unconscious because it was designed to protect you. But often, this fear is based on limiting beliefs, past trauma, or experiences that no longer make sense in their current reality. When you learn to hear your unconscious, you start to realize when a fear is real and when it is just an reflex of something that no longer belongs to you. And instead of letting this fear paralyze you, you learn to use it as a tool to grow. Its intuition is also strengthened in an impressive way. Have you ever had that feeling that you knew exactly what you needed to do, but you couldn't explain why? This is your intuition talking to you, and when you start trusting in this inner voice, your decisions become much more fluid. You no longer need to waste hours or days trying to rationalize each choice. You just feel what is right. And most amazing is that when you follow your intuition, you realize that it all starts to flow in a much more natural way. The universe responds, the right opportunities appear, the doors open. And what once seemed difficult or confusing now makes sense. And that's not all. The way you deal with your emotions also changes completely. Before, you might be hostage to your feelings, being taken by high emotional downs without understanding exactly what was going on. But when you learn to interpret the messages of your unconscious, each emotion has a meaning. You do not feel angry for nothing. You don't feel sadly for no reason. You begin to see these emotions as signs, like internal guides that are showing you something about yourself. And instead of fighting them or repressing them, you learn to use them as tools of transformation. His perception of reality also expands in an impressive way. You begin to realize patterns that once passed unnoticed. He sees connections between events of his life that once seemed isolated. It begins to notice the synchronicities happening more often and, more importantly, understands what they want to tell you. It is as if you are accessing a deeper level of reality where everything makes sense and nothing happens by chance. And when this transformation happens, the people around them also realize. You become more magnetic. Your energy changes. You start to attract situations and people who are aligned with this new level of consciousness. That's because when you are connected with your true self, you become naturally more authentic, more confident, more centered, and this internal change reflects on everything, in your relationships, your work, your health, every area of your life. But here is something important that you need to know. This transformation does not happen overnight. It is a process, a path of self, and a discovery that requires practice, patience, and above all, commitment. You need to be willing to observe yourself, to question your beliefs, to face your fears, and to trust your own power. But the good news is that once you start this journey, there is no return. You can never see life the same way. Now, I want to know about you. What has changed in your perception after this video? Have you noticed times when your unconscious tried to guide you, but did you ignore? Do you feel that you have already started to see your intuition more clearly? Comment down here the phrase, "I trust my unconscious," to show that it is committed to this transformation. If you have gotten here, it is because something inside you has already started to wake up. Perhaps you have realized that your intuition has always been guiding you, that your dreams have never been just random stories, and that the synchronicities around you have always carried hidden messages. The universe already speaks to you through your own mind. The problem is that most of the time we are so busy, distracted, and disconnected from ourselves that we simply ignore these signs. But what if you started paying attention? What would change in your life if, from now on, you would see everything that happens around you as a reflection of what happens within you? Imagine that every intense emotion you feel, every thought that comes out of nowhere, every pattern that is repeated, every inexplicable sensation are not just randoms of your brain, but direct messages from your unconscious, trying to show you something you need to understand. Now think about how many times you have ignored these messages. How many times have your intuition to warn you of something and you chose not to listen? How many times did your body express clear signs that something was wrong and you kept insisting on a path that wasn't for you? The truth is that we have all done that. We have all been through moments when deep down we knew what we should have done, but we chose to ignore that inner voice that warned us. And this is because we were taught to seek answers outside of us. From an early age, we have learned to rely more on external logic than in internal wisdom. We have learned that it is necessary to have concrete evidence to believe in something, that intuition is just a worthless feeling, that dreams are just creations aetherian of the mind, and what coincidences are only coincidences. But what if all that they told you is wrong? What if the key to understanding your life is not out, but inside you? Your unconscious is an ocean of information. He keeps everything you have ever lived, all your experiences, all your pain, all your learning. He knows more about you than yourself. And when you learn to access this knowledge, your life changes completely. The point is that the world around you is a reflection of what happens within your mind. If your mind is confused, your life will also be confused. If you carry unconscious fears, they will manifest in some way in your reality. If you have limiting beliefs about yourself, these beliefs will become experiences that confirm this limitation. But when you change internally, everything around you starts to change too. Have you noticed that when you are in a good emotional condition, things seem to flow more easily? Opportunities arise, answers appear, everything seems to fit. This is no coincidence. This is the universe responding to its internal frequency. Now imagine what your life would look like if you really dominate this connection with your unconscious. If you could interpret your dreams, recognize patterns, identify emotions, and decipher the synchronicities that arise in your way. You would no longer need to feel lost. You would no longer need to seek answers desperately in wrong places. You would have a reliable guide inside you, always ready to show you the best way. And the most amazing thing is that this guide has always been there. He never abandoned you. You just need to learn to listen to it. And here is the big question. Are you willing to pay attention? Because now that you know that your mind is always communicating with you, ignoring this truth would be a choice. You can keep living as you always lived, repeating the same patterns, feeling the same frustrations, and wondering why your life doesn't change. Or you may decide that from today, you will start paying attention. You will begin to record your dreams, observe your emotions, reflect on coincidences, reserve moments of silence to hear your own mind. If you choose this second option, something amazing will happen. You will begin to realize that life has never been against you. She has always been guiding you. The challenges you faced were not punishment, they were teachings. The difficulties were not obstacles, they were tests to strengthen you. Each person who went through his life, every moment of pain, every situation that made you question everything, had a greater purpose. Nothing was by chance. Your unconscious has always tried to show you the way. Now it's your turn to listen. And to make sure you are really committed to this transformation, I want you to comment here below the phrase, "I choose to awaken to my conscience." I want to see who is really ready to get out of the autopilot and start seeing life in a completely new way.